Welcome to another high value conversation. Today, I'm going to be having Anderson Harrison III on to talk about building from your brand story. Anderson is the owner of Superlative Consulting. He also does a lot of work with companies to help them get their brand story out to their audience and their customer base. Because, like a guy said one time that I used to listen to on YouTube, people buy why you do what you do, not what you do. And so being able to communicate to your customer the passion, the desire, the reason for why you're doing what you're doing is very, very important to connecting and helping them love and stay loyal to your brand, and you deliver value to them. So I'm going to go ahead and invite Anderson in right now and let him elaborate more on this and kind of teach us some things that you can use and help building your brand story. For being here as well. If you're watching this on YouTube later or you're checking the reel out, go ahead and leave a question, or if you're here now, ask a question because we love being able to reply to you. Anderson, good morning.
Morning. What's going on?
Man, you're what's going on this morning. Thanks for being here. Thanks for taking time to help us with brand story. I know in a time, in an age where people are, coming more into themselves, trying to share, put themselves out there, build companies, build, what they would, I guess, say brand identity. You have a unique skill set and a wonderful perspective on how to be able to enhance that effort for people. And I just wanted to bring you on today to really kind of let our conversation about these topics, reach people who are, maybe struggling with helping to connect with their customer and express their brand fully. So how are you doing?
I'm great. I'm glad to talk about the stuff that I pretty much do every day, not only in my entrepreneurial life, but also, my professional life. And so we deal with clients and small businesses, and also, even larger corporations when it comes to their brand story, their branding elements, all of that stuff. So, this is my jam. This is right up my alley. So.
Excellent. So what I love to do for people who can't stay long or someone who can only catch a little bit of the video, I like to be able to go straight into, a good question. So let me ask you this. Tell me why it's important to have a brand story.
Yeah. So, your story, first of all, is important. It should be told. It should be celebrated, and there's a platform that should be created for your story. And I believe that your story actually helps dictate the rest of the way in which you brand your vision, your business, your company. And also it helps with the marketing and the communication. Like, all of those particular things surrounds the story, right? So for instance, in my case, having worked in marketing agencies and branding agencies for a little over a decade, when I started my business, the story was for me that I got tired of the smaller businesses, your startups, not having access to good branding and marketing tools. And in agency work, a lot of it is dictated on hours, right? So if you only have, as a company, 25 hours of money to spend towards your project, where you're not going to be as visible to the team, to the marketing team, or to that company as someone who's got unlimited dollars, right? And so the thought process and the intentionality that you spend in really trying to create something authentic, right? Oftentimes, it doesn't go to, the smaller businesses. So what I wanted to do was to create a business that focused on startups and focused on, smaller businesses. And also I wanted to focus on minority-owned businesses, because I also feel like there is this idea that you can only brand Black businesses one way. And that's not the case. Like, you brand Black businesses or brown businesses or businesses owned by people of color in the way in which you would brand white businesses or any other business, right? You listen to their story. And so, yeah, so that is my story as to why I came up with Superlative Brand Consulting. And so as a result, everything that has come from the story of wanting to target those audiences and help those people has grown from the story of me, wanting to do that. Like all of the branding elements, the way in which I target the audience, the language that I use, the frameworking, the infrastructural frameworking of how the business is built, and the processes in which we take. All of that surrounds the story surrounding, why I'm here.
I love it. I love it. So your passion for this came from just kind of seeing that struggle of people not being able to have access to, better branding and marketing because they were limited. Like, would you say that's what kind of sparked your passion?
Sure. I mean, you take a look at, small businesses in your local area. And many times, it could be something as simple as the sign is not placed in the most trafficked part of the street, right? And that is a serious component of marketing. As someone who's in real estate, location, yes, like that's it, right? It's the same thing with any marketing. The location of that particular element is really important. And so a lot of people, especially those who are starting their businesses, are just kind of taking care of the major things that they need to operate the business, and forgetting that the marketing component and the branding component is a huge part of that, right? Sure. So they're just flying by the seat of their pants. They're just placing things in areas where people can't see them. Are they chosen some colors that actually mean things that are, and the antithesis of the product and the service that they're trying to offer, right? And so ideally, they believe that, I think many entrepreneurs really want to spend the money on marketing. They want to spend the money on good branding. They want to have a great logo. They want to have all that. But just like arts in school, many times that goes to the wayside, right? And so, yeah, so that's why I wanted to do this, because I wanted to give intentional, meaningful branding and create that for companies that otherwise might not get that because they're the smaller company.
Yeah. All right. So let me ask you this. How do you know a client needs help crafting their brand story?
When the story doesn't necessarily align with what is going on with the business. So many times if a person calls me, if a company calls me, it's because they're having some type of issue, right? And so that issue many times is that they are not, they're not engaged with the audience that they would like, or something as simple as, we never did like our logo, and now we have the money to create something different, right? And so, the process of getting down to the why of, why we're here, oftentimes has to do with the fact that the story of how they got here, the story of why they do what they do, has not been told, right? So case in point, I was head of marketing for a suit company a couple years ago, and before I got hired on, I was doing some consulting work with the founder and CEO, and we were just talking about what led her to create this particular company. And, long story short, she being a CEO, a female CEO, had to sit amongst all these male CEOs, and their suits were terrible looking. They weren't fitted, they weren't tailored, and they were probably expensive, but they didn't look it because they didn't fit, right? And then, of course, she also felt less confident because the options that they have for women as far as business wear were limited, right? So all of these things were a constant source of pain. They were pain points for her. And so as a result, she founded this company. And so the big question that I asked us, I was like, what do you want people to feel when they put a suit on of yours? And she said, I want them to feel like they could take risk and tackle life. And right then, my
Oh
brain,
yeah.
right,
Oh yeah.
the light bulb went off, and I was like, dude, that's the tagline right there. Like that is the tagline right there. Take risk, tackle life. And so for a couple of years, like that was how not only the tagline and how we branded things and the hashtag we created, but it was also a principle by which we guided ourselves. So one thing that the brand story will do, your brand story will always remind you of why you are here, why you're doing what you're doing. And it would also guide you in your next steps. If it is not a part of that story, if it's something that takes you away from the true core of why you created that thing, then that story serves as a reminder to bring you back home. So yeah, that's why it's important for you to really have that story, really be comfortable in not only telling that story to yourself, but using that story as a launch pad for everything else.
I love that. I love how you put that. It has the dual purpose,
Yeah.
right? It has the show the audience why you do this, and then also the remind me or keep me ingrained in my mission of what got me to start this in the first place. It's like when Steve Jobs was like, do something that you're not always gonna like it, right? Like there's parts of
Right.
there's parts of business that you're not gonna like, but your brand story is like your motive, right?
Yeah.
It pushes you through the things that you don't like because you love what you're trying to do. So let me ask you this. Technically, right? Let's get technical a little bit. What are the components or what makes a good brand story? Because someone can sit in front of you and tell you like a big long story. You're like, all right, now we got to chop that up for the audience. So what makes for a good brand story?
I think the story in and of itself is good. Like the story essentially is the reason why you do what you do. So I think if you're trying to express that story on a platform, the most important thing is, that you be honest, that you be succinct. So you're very clear and direct as to why you do what it is that you do. And I also think that it's important that you take elements of your story should be a part of your marketing process. It should be a part of your brand building process, in terms of, like, for instance, going back to, for me, my mantra for Superlative Brand Consulting is that each story should be told, and every story is beautiful and it should be told and it should be celebrated. Right. So every time that there is an opportunity for me to tell why there is a superlative, right, I take a couple minutes to actually do that. And so, yeah, what makes a good brand story is the truth, the authenticity, the clarity. And again, each time you have the ability to talk about what you do, to mention that. I think it's a great avenue to encourage people to tell their own personal stories. I think many of us can sometimes be ashamed of our own personal stories when we realize, and I think you can attest to this too, is when we tell those very difficult parts of ourselves, if we express those things, right, then we find that there's an audience that is organically waiting for us, right, that can relate to us. And so this is not just about business per se, as much as it is about connection.
Definitely.
Connection with people, connection with ourselves, and connection with our calling and what it is that we're supposed to do. So hopefully I've answered your question, but ideally the story is already good. The story, because it's yours. But I think the clarity, the authenticity, and all of that and the reminder, the connection between what you do and why you do it, and the story that's in between, um, is a good thing, and it's an important thing.
I think the best part of what you said is the vulnerability to
Mm-hmm.
be able to go to that like deep starting spot, you know,
Right.
and not being afraid to realize that. And I guess sometimes you don't realize that after the fact, that that is why people are going to connect with you, because you think you're going to get embarrassed by bringing up this seemingly vulnerable part of how your story got started, when a lot of your audience is going to say, wow, I'm there right now. I'm where you're saying this was sparked in you right
Yeah.
now. And if I can now connect with you, maybe I can get from where I am to where you are. But when you only show this is where I am, this is where I am, this is where I am, that person doesn't know how relatable your product or your process can be, right? Superlative consulting, right? You are successful now and helping brands now, but you started from your job to here, built your own brand in order to be successful enough to connect with them and to have them reach out to you. So you're saying, hey, I successfully navigated the startup process this way. You're starting up. Let me show you how to accomplish this. And they can say, wow,
Right.
okay, yeah. Like, go ahead.
Yeah, I've seen it work. The vulnerability piece and the telling of the story. I've seen it work two different ways, two huge ways. One of which, as it relates to audience, one of which is not ever wanting to own my business per se. Like I have never been one of those people who are anti-corporate and and own your own business, be your own boss. Because I understood the severity of owning their own business. I understood the hardship, and I understood the responsibility of ethical leadership as it related to owning your own business, and that is a huge mantle to have. Like that is a gross, a big undertaking, right? And so that was never attractive to me, right? But as I began to really navigate through the corporate space, oh, and let me say this: I also thought that I knew I was smart, but I also didn't think that I had all of the tools to be a CEO or to own my own business. And so, navigating through that corporate space for all those years, um, I learned that it's not that difficult. If you got Google and you can surround yourself with subject matter experts and hard work. Like that was pretty much the recipe. And it was a former CEO telling me, "Hey, Andy, you can do this. Like, this is not that hard. You do not have to be born a CEO in order to run your own business, right?" And so telling that story to people who have been bitten by the entrepreneurial bug, who might feel like I don't have all the tools I need to do this, right? They're inspired, and they go after the same kind of dream of having their own business. The second part is, just talking with people who have this entrepreneur idea, but they don't have all of the elements, right? They don't have, they have bits and pieces of the idea. They have the speckles of light, but they haven't been able to put it all together. And so my telling them about how I've helped other people, how I've helped breathe life into people's ideas, right? Has encouraged them to also take the plunge in creating their own business and patronizing or partnering with Superlative to execute that fully from them, from the beginning stages all the way until the business starts, right? And so it's worked for me there. It's gotten me business, but it's also allowed me to inspire people to go after their own thing. So it's, you'll be surprised that telling your own story and being vulnerable about those parts of yourself that you may be ashamed of creates all of these audiences, but also creates revenue.
Definitely. Definitely. Let me ask you this, because you're making me think about the story. What is a subtle mistake that people make when they try to tell their brand story kind of like without professional help?
So I think more specifically, it's like the branding mistakes that people make, and one thing that one thing that I believe that people do is that they go the cheap route first, and I say that with caution, right? Because cheap does not mean bad. But typically in these cases, it was a bad decision. It was a bad decision because they accepted something that was inauthentic to their story and inauthentic to the brand, right? So it's choosing a logo that you could generate online that, you know, you've not talked to any human, you've not talked to any artist who's able to help conceptualize with you about how this ought to look. Here it is, you don't like the color orange, and you got orange all in this logo that was generated for you. So there's already some incongruency there because you're having to look at something that is supposed to be an extension of yourself, and it is peppered with things that you don't like, right? And so that is one mistake that I see. The other mistake that I see is, I think, just a business kind of infrastructural issue is when you try to be all things to everyone, right? It is boutique services and boutique experiences, personalized experiences. That's the thing. Like, if you are great at making grilled cheese, then you should stay away from bologna. You know, like, that grilled cheese will sell. And you can do so many things around that grilled cheese. Like, you can experiment with different cheeses. You can experiment with different breads. You can, you know, there's so many things that you can do to exhaust what it is that you're currently doing without you trying to be this catch-all moment for everybody else. And so I see a lot of people get in trouble with specificity. Like, they are not, or they don't believe that what they specialize in is enough. And that's two common things. The other thing is, you know, words mean things. So I think it's really important for you to know what you're talking about and know, like, how like, it's, you know, we talk about when we name our kids, right? That name has meaning. Like, the same way in which you would name your child or name your pet, you know, someone or something that you love, you name your business with the same type of intentionality.
Yeah.
And so I know people who don't necessarily like the name, right? Or they inherited a business and the name never really sat with them. So those are some really common branding mistakes that I've run into. Yeah.
All right. So let me ask you this. When people have those mistakes, but they're like not realizing that they're having them yet, what is like something that a person should be able to recognize and say, you know what, I think it's about time that I get some help? Like, what are the unrecognizable signals that a person who's kind of like, you know, DIY, doing it yourself, not realizing that the logo's not working, or like you said a minute ago, having colors that are opposite from what they're trying to, when is the moment that they probably need to be like, you know, let me get some help with this?
Yeah, I think the moment you realize you need some help, you have been needing the help probably for some time, right? Also, I mean, it's simple as, you know, if you don't have clients or if you don't have customers, like,
Yeah.
you know, when you're constantly in the red, right? There's a problem. I think the root of all of this is you can either spend the money on the front end or you can spend it on the back end.
Yeah.
I think
For sure.
that's the bottom line in this, is that if you do a lot of this work in the very beginning, then you save yourself a lot of heartache in the end. So I believe that, just, you know, if you're opening a restaurant, just like you need stoves and you need, you know, gas or electric, you need all of those things, all of these operational things. I think you need to hire a consultant whose specialization is in restaurant management or restaurant creation, you need to spend that money because they're able to give you the tools that you need so that you won't have so many of these pitfalls throughout the process, right? So I think that it's really getting a consultant, it's really getting a branding consultant, it's really having someone to advise you on the ways in which to market, help you determine how to reach the audience. Well, what audience, that you're trying to reach, which audience you can reach, and then how you go about reaching that audience, what methods and ways in which you go about reaching them. I think you do that so that you won't have so many of these pitfalls. But ideally, it's never too late to turn around, right? We all have made mistakes. And it's about whether or not you're flexible enough to allow yourself to pivot.
No, for sure. So talking about pivot, I want to get into diversity and inclusion, especially in branding and marketing, and ask you this, because I've seen this work in both of the wrong ways nowadays, right? Like there's the inclusion and the diversity, and it's like more people come, and there's the diversity and exclusion, and there's like more people stay away, right? Mm-hmm. So my question is it important to express diversity and inclusion as a part of your brand's message to potential customers? And how do you do that without coming across as pandering?
That's a good question. I want to, this is really, this is really important because, so, when 2 years ago, after the murder of George Floyd, we saw the explosion of like DEI, positions and initiatives in companies, especially the C-suite began to now incorporate diversity and inclusion officers, right? So, you got your chief marketing officer, you got chief operations officer, now you got your chief, diversity and inclusion officer. So I was one of the ones that was very skeptical about these positions, right? Because being in corporate, that one, the C-suite is the most desired place to be, and that many people of color, like many of us, are shooting for those spots, and we don't get there because we're not allowed there, right? And so many people, I saw so many people who were people of color who had worked and overworked to secure one of these spots in the field that they were most knowledgeable in, like marketing, like operations, right, like finance, who were being now promoted to these DEI spots, right? Because the idea is that if you're a Black person, well, you know how to include and be diverse in your choices, and so on and so forth. And I read an article about 6 months ago, two things, that these people that were actually ascending to these spots were being laid off. The DEI positions were, underfunded. They were being cut because companies didn't have the money for them. And that also many of the initiatives that were promised by these companies during the height of the murder of George Floyd and the subsequent events that happened, like many of the initiatives that they promised did not come to pass. So DEI has become a buzzword that has both negative and connotation, I believe, right? Because people say they want to be about the cause, and people pretend like they want to be about the cause, but in the end, the dollars and cents show otherwise, right?
Sure.
And so, and we are more now, I think, as people of color and as Black people, we've always been, but I think there is this this ability for people to recognize pandering very quickly, right? And companies' inauthenticity as it relates to providing platforms for people of color. So as it relates to, I believe, branding, to answer your question, I wanted to get that tidbit out.
No, do your thing. Do your thing. And I'm not
telling people don't go for DEI positions. I'm not saying not to do that, but what I'm saying is be very careful, because I'm seeing that those are the first positions to get cut, and I
Have
know
you
that.
seen that? Have you seen that it's like backfiring in like movies as well as a lot of TV shows and stuff? Not just about people of color, but transgender, LGBTQ, also female women. Like there's a lot of backlash coming out, and I think my mom was saying this the other day. Even the term woke, like you talk about Black culture, right? Woke used to just mean I kind of could see some things that are maybe kind of hidden. They took that word and gave it a whole new meaning to include all stuff democratic, right? Like they really changed the definition of the word. And so now there's like a big backlash where movies and TV companies are trying to include all types of people in their stories, in their creations. And it's turned into a backlash of people being like, oh, well, you gender swap the character, you color swap the character, you're intentionally putting this in this story, you're coming at kids. So where's the balance between, inclusion and diversity, and then like they say, like pandering or being a social justice warrior?
Right. So, the first part of the question was, like, how do we do that? And I think in terms of how do we market or how do we brand to diverse audiences, right? Without pandering. And I believe that the root of that is one's own intentionality, or the company's intentionality, right? If my intentionality is to make my service or my product accessible to everyone, I think because you've gone into it with really good intentions, that means you're going to do the work that it takes in order to have that particular thing come through. So if the panel, the advisory panel that you have, and the decision-making panel that you have, or the artistic focus panel that you have is not diverse, then you can't expect to come up with this diverse presentation or imaging that will attract this audience, right? So there are, and I've had my own experiences where creating toolkits for companies and partnering with an agency that helped with animation, that did animation. And so wanting to take a look at some of their stock images and thinking, Black women don't wear their hair like that. Black guys do not wear their hair like that. So having to coach them right into how to diversify the elements that they're selling to other people, right? I probably should have got a check for that, because that was some consulting. But at the end of the day, when I looked at the staff of these companies, right, they're all white, they're all men, or they're mostly men, right? So ideally, I think the intentionality is the key. And it expresses itself in who you have around you as far as making the decisions about how things ought to look. As it relates to the second part that you were talking about of backlash, I think, I also have, as you know, a music background. And, one of the things that I studied was classical music. So, I did operas and went to operas, and, these operas, when they were composed in the 17 and 1800s, they were not written for Black people necessarily, right? But we have Black singers, we have Black musicians who have gotten these lead roles, right? And so though it is, I want us to begin to think about these things in terms of the role has nothing to do with the color of the person necessarily that's in it. Like most of these things that we're talking about have to do with the human experience, and the human experience is diverse. I know what it's like to have a bad day, just like you know what it's like to have a bad day. And it is not the unique experience of somebody Black or white to have had a bad day. It is the human experience, right? And so I'm fine with a Black Ariel. I think it's great, a Black Ariel. And I don't think that there's, I don't think it is a, a pander move to place a black aria there.
Yeah.
And I don't think that, just like I'm all for a black Aida for the opera folks out there. And you know, so for me, I don't see those things as pandering. I do see, however, pandering when, you know, and this is offsetting, but when white politicians go to black churches and it is an obvious, you're obviously there to pander to the people. You're obviously, you've entered the cultural spot of a person, of a group of people, not to experience, but to get their votes. I do think there's some pandering in that, but I don't think there's pandering in the interchanging of roles and what have you. And I don't think it's pandering to diversify a TV commercial about a service or a product. Does that make sense?
No, it does. It makes perfect sense. Like I agree with you on a couple of levels. And it's hard for me to just try and keep all three of the things because you said so much good stuff.
Right.
One, I want to say, like, I think that you make a great point about you have to be able to have the people around you to give you the authentic ideas, right? Like if you want your company to show that you have support for transgender and gay rights, if you want to show that you support women, like those people should be involved in the process so that it comes across as authentic, right? But I also think that just slapping the flag or the colors on something for a week or two is pandering.
Right.
You're not genuinely trying to make sure that your product assists this person in their life, right? There's a difference between saying our company supports you trying to do whatever you're trying to do, whether it's black, whatever cause it is, right? Jewish, like Asian rights, like whatever the Ukraine, we support the war in Ukraine. There's a big difference between what they call virtue signaling or taking advantage of the high popular thing in the moment and slapping it on your product to bring more people in because that's a high awareness point right now, versus saying people who are involved in this thing, my product actually supports them. If they were to buy it and use it, it's for them too, right? There's a line right there. I
know companies that have their Buy Black initiatives. Like they will give employees money to go and support a black business, right? I know of a couple banks that actually do that. But ideally, if you aren't loaning to African Americans to buy a home or a car, or if you are not employing African Americans, then what good is that black buyback moment, right?
And I'm not trying to cut you off, but I have to tell you about an experience I had yesterday. Oh my God. So, you know, I'm a father, got my kids, like always trying to be super dad. And there's really nothing I get to see, I mean, aside from like Pursuit of Happiness, where I still see like the dad and the kids, right? And so there's a new thing on Netflix right now. It's like my Dad, the Bounty Hunter. It's a new show, right? So I'm like, all right, awesome. You know, this is a dad and his two kids. And then like I was sitting there for a second, get ready to turn on. And I always screen stuff before I show it to my kids. So I have my 2-year-old, and I'm like, okay, this is something that me and him could probably get into, a little animated series on Netflix. So I'm sitting there, I'm getting ready to look at it. I'm just like, where's their mom? Right? I was like, where's their mom? Right? So I open up the episodes and I kind of look down like the preview screen of the episodes. I'm like, I'm still not seeing no mama. So then I start reading the description, and then the first thing in the description said, the first episode, like the little girl, little boy's name are going to visit their dad so I'm just like, oh man, they already ain't together. You know what I mean? I'm like, why he can't have his family and go be the bounty hunter? It's already a broken home, right?
It's already broken.
So then I gotta say this. I'm scrolling through the first part, right? And I get to where the kids are at the house with their mom, right? They're playing the video games, so on and so forth. And the mom walks over to get them ready to go, like, all right, y'all, let's go. And then her phone buzzes. She looks at the text message. It's like, hey, can you drop them off a little later? I'm gonna be kind of late. He texts her, right? Then she like, of course. And I'm just like, oh my God. like, what is, like, you know what I mean? Like, why she already, he ain't nothing. You know what I mean? It's like, God.
Now, I see where you're going, right? but I also know that there's a realistic aspect to that, right?
Yeah.
And it's both. It might be disappointing, and it might be it might be disappointing because we want to see images, and we want to see things that inspire us, and in that moment, you know, the mom being there, this couple together and working as a more traditional family unit might have been more inspiration to you in that moment. The hilarity is, on the flip side, is that what you are describing to me is realistic. I know about 5 people who are going through that, but again, to your point, like pandering, brokenness, all of that.
Hey, look, if I could get some aliens, I could get that they family together.
Right.
It's realistic, but if I'm about to get some unrealistic, if we're gonna call that unrealistic, put them together then. Give me some Blackish type of family.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Keep them together. Inspire the youth.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
transport them to, you know, what they. But anyway, I was just saying that was a funny example for me of how you can still do, quote unquote, to me, inclusion may be wrong. Right? Like I'm trying to give the black dad superhero, but I'm not paying attention to the fact that he still couldn't hero his family together, and you know, his whole story be inspirational, not just, oh, you know, he spent some time with his kids be the thing that's inspirational, because dudes don't be spending time with their children. I'm like, yeah, you know,
and the typical or the stereotypical attitudinal mama.
Man, that's what's messed up too. That their mama was like showing black women like, I got to carry the whole load, and Lord, he ain't showing up on time, and like, I'm like, man, what if she was just like, what if her reaction would have been like, I'm not gonna say nothing out loud in front of the children about how aggravated I am with your daddy. You know, like, she had poise, and you know, she was able to be like, what y'all want to eat? We're gonna leave a little later. I'm gonna do something right quick. You know what I'm saying? Like, ooh, okay,
yeah,
like, you know,
yeah. No, I get it, but you know, I get it. Disappointment sells. You know.
Yeah, you know. And so another thing too, and like, I'm not saying like I'm not on like a side. I'm more awareness, right? I love movies, and I think one of my hobbies is like movie critiquing and watching. And so we're talking about branding and companies. Marvel and Disney have been kind of struggling right now with, you know, some of the way that they're having a hard time balancing their diversity and inclusion with the IPs that they've acquired. So they have some IPs that have a predominantly white male traditional fan base when it comes to Star Wars and it comes to Marvel products, because the predominantly large amount of, I'm not saying the community is not diverse, it's very diverse, but I'm saying the backlash is coming from the larger base of white male consumers who grew up on certain comic books, grew up on certain Star Wars things, and now seeing that Marvel, who bought them, is like, we own this now. We can include more people. We can include more women roles. We can include more women superheroes. We can include more characters of all type of sexual orientation, all kind of colors, and we're going to do that with these IPs. And we're trying to bring you along with the idea that it's okay for this to be for everyone. It's not just for you. And they're like, no, every movie is a failure. It's not boring. We're going to also like downtrend it on IMDb on purpose because we're not getting what we want. And it's been interesting to watch as a business person, that business try to find this balance of trying to move towards a future of diversity and inclusion, but also struggling with a customer base that's kind of mad about that.
It rings true that at the core of all of this work, whether it's your business or what you view for entertainment, or what you look at on television, or it doesn't matter, that the root of all of this is representation really does matter. And when they told us it didn't matter, like, it really did, right? Because what we're saying is, you know, the large white male base saying, why can't I not see my face? Why are the things that I grew up seeing, where I did see components or aspects of myself, are being wiped away, and people who don't necessarily look like me are being put into these positions, right? Are being put into these roles. It's that very thing right there, and it means that people connect to images, people connect to places, people connect to each other based on what components of themselves they see in that thing, right? And so, to bring it full circle, it was exactly what propelled me to create my business, right? Is because in the process of helping other companies with their marketing, with their branding, you know, I did not see a place for people of color, especially Black people. We were not creating images that were authentic, and we weren't creating, again, logos and branding elements that were authentic to Black people. Again, I'm partnering with agencies that have archaic or very like whitewashed or Eurocentric images of Black people. This is not us, and so there's power and there's truth in the fact that again, for me to connect with something, I have to see an aspect of myself in it. And so
say that again. Say that again.
They don't have to rewind because I don't know what I said.
That's what you said. In order for me to engage with something, I have to see myself in it.
Yeah, I have to see myself in it. I have to see a component of myself in it. And so nice. That, I think, is what creates, again, the connection with anybody that's an entrepreneur. That's what creates the connection between you and your audience, is that whatever it is that you're providing, whatever it is that you can help them with, they see an aspect of themselves through you, through your company, through what it is that you're offering. So yeah, that representation actually matters. And it's a pain point, just like it's a pain point for these white men to not see themselves as whatever role. It's a pain point when Black people can't see themselves in images.
So what do you think the balance is between, it's such a complex issue. What do you think the balance is between doing something that is creative and authentic and being yourself, and having to navigate the landmines of other people being offended, right? So what I'm trying to describe is, as I consume media nowadays and kind of pay attention to what's going on in the world, cancel culture and other people being offended because they chose to be, not because you intended to offend them, is given the same energy as intended offense. So right now, the NBA is getting backlash for including Karl Malone as one of the top 3 scorers of all time in Utah, where he used to play for the Utah Jazz, because of his past and some of the things that he's done before. It's like the NBA offended us by bringing him out here, when the thing that they were talking about doesn't dismiss what he did. It doesn't support what he did. They're just saying, hey, over here in this place, on this list of things, he's a person on this list. He's 3rd all-time scoring. We're in Utah. He used to play for the Utah Jazz. There are people here that might have forgiven him and still like him for what he did here. So he's just here in this NBA setting, in this Jazz setting. But then there's a whole other side of people that's like, because I had some trauma in my life and I think he did, I can't prove, but I heard he did something, he shouldn't even be there at all, right? How do you navigate being like authentic in your brand, but also battling or dealing with like the landmine of potential cancel culture?
So I'm not going to touch that Karl Malone story.
Okay.
Because I just, like, Twitter just told me or informed me, because I don't keep up with.
Yeah, no, it's just an example, not right or wrong of what he did. Just
right. So I was
not on purpose.
Right, but I was going to say, since I don't know all the aspects of it, but what I would say in terms of the example of an entrepreneur deciding, or a decision maker deciding to be bold in a decision that ultimately is I would say, a good thing for the good of the general public. So it's what I'm thinking of in terms of this is if kind of on this diversity kick that we're talking about is when I make my space inclusive of all kinds of people. If I'm making space for people of color, if I'm making space for the disabled, because we often do not talk about the disabled, right? If I'm making space for LGBTQ people, if I create a brand that is inclusive, that might receive some backlash. I think it all goes back to why you're doing what you're doing. If you said that I want to be able to serve everybody, then again, your story reminds you of the obligation that you've made. And that everybody means everybody, right? And so pitfalls, disagreements, outcries, all of those things come when you decide to be true and authentic to who you are and do what you said that you would do. I don't think that there is, I'm discovering the older I get, I don't know if there is a balance.
Yeah, that's what I was asking. Yeah, like, it's to the point now where it's like landmines. It's like you just got to step and hopefully you don't blow your leg off. Like,
yeah. I don't think that there is a balance. I think there is, or I think the intentionality is the guiding principle and the guiding force by which by what we do. And you understand that when you decide to do this particular thing, that there are going to be people who don't necessarily agree. And you have to navigate. You have to be guided by, again, whatever principle that you've established for yourself and for your business. And so my business is about creating access to quality branding elements for especially small businesses and businesses that are led by people of color. And if other people have a problem with that, that is their problem for them to have. And I can navigate that and I can deal with that.
So let me ask you this. Is there a time when it's okay to be like, I'm not trying to offend you, but you're offended. If you don't want what I have, don't come over here. And then is it wrong for that person to say, well, if you're not going to serve me, then you need to be out of business?
As entrepreneurs, we should have the right to serve who it is that we want to sell to, work with or partner with whoever we want to partner with. I think we have these weed out processes called free consultations to where we can engage a potential client to see if we would be a good fit. And I've not really run into a situation yet where a client hasn't necessarily been a good fit for me, or I've had to refuse services. And I hope I never have that issue. But what I can say is that I am not everything to everyone, and I will never be that to everyone. And so I think that should be a mutual understanding to where if we connect and we realize that there's not a vibe there and that we can't help one another, then, or if at a moment in the process, which I put this in my contract, where we're having a fundamental disagreement about a particular thing, right? That we decide that at that moment, we would just call it quits. Whatever money you've already spent, or whatever work that I've done, I've compensated for that, and we can agree to part ways. But I do know of cases where people who have bakery shops that claim to serve everybody won't make a wedding cake for a gay couple. Well, you didn't intend to serve everybody. So that shouldn't be a part of your culture. That shouldn't be a part of your branding element. That you have certain people that you want to serve, and that is sad in and of itself. But essentially, as entrepreneurs, we do have the right to serve who we want to. I just hope that we align with people who are open to serving everybody if that's what they say that they're going to do, and actually do it with excellence, and not I will serve you because you have the money to pay up front.
No, for sure. And I think also, like you just said, like you should be able to not have a service. Like, I don't know about the wedding cake thing. Like, I feel like that's a charged issue, because it's like, I don't think the reason how somebody's living their life should be the reason why you can't just give them a thing that you're serving. Like, you don't have to partner with them and go join their cause or like have their back, but you also shouldn't be like judging them and being like, I'm not going to do this, because that part of the business is not really like affecting the business, if that makes sense. Like, you know what I mean?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. You know, but also, like you said, everything is not for everyone. So like, I'm not going to try and shut down Arby's because they're not serving me fried chicken. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, but I would
like
to know who is keeping Arby's open. Now, I do want to know. I would like to know who's keeping Arby's open, because yeah, I would like to know that.
Vin Raines is keeping Arby's open. But you know what I'm saying? Like, everything is not for everyone, and it's. I think it goes back to, like you said, intentionality too. I'm a big person when it comes to this phrase that I've kind of discovered and hit upon is there's a difference between you hurt me and what you did hurt me, right? You hurt me is, oh my God, I can see the intentionality. Like, I can see the plan. I can see the on-purpose behavior that got me to this point where something caused harm to me. And then there's what you did made me hurt, but you didn't do it on purpose, right? And I think that we have lost that line of giving a person to say, look at my motive. I didn't do that on purpose, right? And so I'm not defending these two things as I'm getting ready to talk about them. I just want to use them as examples.
Sure.
There's two examples of, I think, what just happened to Don Lemon. I only got the side story of what he did. And the side story was kind of like, he said that some woman wasn't as young as she was trying to talk about somebody else. So I think Nikki Haley is running for president along Donald Trump. And they were saying something about ageism or something. And then Don Lemon was like, well, she thinks she in her prime. And then like people got offended from what I hear by that, right? Also, Tiger Woods was on the golf course this weekend and he was having a back and forth with another golfer and he like kind of beat the guy or something. Again, this is kind of like what I'm hearing about the story. And in order to like say, you know, hey man, I'm beating you, he handed him a tampon, but on the slick, like he handed him a tampon, like as a joke to be like, you know, and then all of a sudden, like, you know, the internet goes crazy. Like, oh, you have a daughter, da, 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 da. So all I'm saying is sometimes if that wasn't for you, like, yeah, he meant to do a little jab to his friend and his friend was probably like, ha. But for you to look at it and then be like, expand that to his motive, or even if it wasn't his motive, he hurt all the women in the world by using a tampon as a joke. It's like, man, that's kind of a bit much. Like, again, I'm not in this situation. I'm just saying that's the Arby's fried chicken thing. It's like, I see them serving roast beef. I think it's nasty, but I'm not about to be like, hey, y'all, isn't this so nasty that it should shut down? And then a few people that's eating it is like, no, it's delicious. And we're like, you're wrong. But it was no intention. It just, I found the reason to be hurt.
I think one thing that I want to say as it relates to like both of these things is that intention doesn't necessarily mean that everything you do is right. You can do things with intention. You can do things with the right heart and still mess up something or hurt someone. I think it is. I think it is nothing wrong to say when you have hurt someone or when you have done something that was unintentional, to say that was not my intention. Like, I apologize for the infraction. That was not my intention. right? My intention was this. I think it's a sign of maturity for you to be able to realize that even though you had good intentions, that it may have come across in a way that was hurtful to someone. I also think that in many cases, as I've seen, is that we have this ability. I think there's this gross ability to re-narrate things for the purpose of creating conflict where there was obviously none.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I don't necessarily know the story about what happened with Don Lemon. I did see that. But what I know about the Haley situation is that she was talking about doing competency tests for people who are 75 years and up. So she's talking about the current president, the previous president, and any government official that is over the threshold of 75. And so it has been coined as an ageism, a statement about ageism, that she is, as a alleged minority, as a woman, that how could she, having knowing what it's like to be a woman in a very male-dominated arena, and a minority at that, then pronounce that these metrics ought to be put in place that are obvious examples of ageism. Like, how dare she do that, right? So but again, I don't know enough about that story to necessarily comment on that, but as your point about intentionality, I believe that just because we have good intentions about something does not mean that somebody might not get hurt in the process. And if and when that hurt does happen, or we wrong someone or do something bad or what have you, that we're mature enough and we're aware enough to say, that wasn't my intention, but I do apologize.
Well, where does the responsibility come in, though? So just right quick, you're saying if my intention was good and I did something deliberately, and then someone took it wrong, then I say, hey, that wasn't my intention. I was trying to do good, but I'm sorry that it came across that way to you. I'm saying, what if I didn't have a good intention? I was just over here doing something in my business that was none of your business, and you looked and then decided to be offended where you was at and not trying to tell me that I did that to you.
So, if we go back to the example that I provided about, a certain bakery, because this has happened, a certain bakery denying service for LGBTQ clients, right? And there was a public outrage as a result of that bakery, right? So that's what you're saying. Like, this person decided, I don't want to make cakes for gay people, that it goes against my beliefs, or this antithesis of my values, or whatever the case might be. And then you come over, you want your cake, and you mad because he won't make it. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, like kind of. Also, like Kyrie. Like Kyrie is like, oh, I like some of the stuff in this movie. I didn't say none of the other stuff that you about to say. I said because I said I like this movie. Like, oh, right. Check. He didn't say I like this movie. He said good stuff in here. Check it out. And then it was like, oh, Kanye said that yesterday. So because he said that yesterday, but he already canceled. Hey, got you now. And anti this, anti that. You're offending people. You have to lose your sponsorship. Loses. Like, why isn't anyone, because of the backlash, also saying, yeah, he didn't like deliberately say that. It was easier to get the headlines and jump on the side of we're offended too, or he shouldn't have offended y'all like us because he shouldn't have offended y'all. Why is it easier for people nowadays? And as a brand, how do you navigate accidentally stepping into that hole where now you're in that position where you're like, oh gosh, we're supporting this person, or we have this person who's endorsing us, and we can kind of see where they're coming from. So do we like support them through this, or do we abandon ship and just jump with the crowd? Like where is that at? I know you said it probably don't have any balance, but it's a good topic to be in.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't think that there's a balance. Mm-hmm. We've seen this particular scenario play out for years, where people make one of the two decisions. They either they pull their endorsements, like everybody jump ship, or some people stay. Like I don't know what that risk looks like for a business. I've not yet had to go through that. I don't plan to, honestly. I don't want to grow that big to where, I don't want to have that kind of headache. But I think to your earlier point, if I think we were talking about it from like the business standpoint. If a business does not want to serve you, or if a business's practices are incongruent with your personal values, then the simplest thing to do is for you to not engage with that business. It's the simplest thing is for you to not to engage with that brand. I only like to do business. I only like to spend my money with brands and businesses that have the same values that I do. And I think it all comes down to, again, values.
Yeah.
And if they align, and I think that, to me, that answers like all of those things.
Yeah, man. I just think it's a good topic because it's like, and even the people in the comments are making good comments about like the topic. I thought it was a good place to go because it is so nuanced, right? I think I'm of the position, and I think I'm gonna always just stay old school. Like, I get what you're saying, I recognize your feelings, but I ain't do that. And you gonna have to respect me just like I respect you. Like, if you don't respect the fact that I'm saying you straight up, show me where I targeted you and how this came about, and show me that I did it to you on purpose, I'm not taking the purposeful angle on this. Like, you know what I mean? I'm gonna take the awareness, respect, acknowledgement of your feelings, and I'm gonna say, I'm sorry that happened to you. Sure. From me doing it. I can see now what you're saying about how it offended you, but I'm not gonna take it to the extra step of I'm saying it with like forgiveness for my purposeful effort. No, I'm not taking it like you did that to me.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think the part that I also didn't say is that there has to be, for the other side, like I can apologize for having, I can apologize for slighting somebody unintentionally, or I can apologize for a wrong, especially when I realize that. But the other part of this has to be that the person who is offended, or the people that are offended, seek also some understanding, right? That
I just said that. Yeah, yep, true.
That the other, there is another perspective there, and there is this idea, or there should be this idea of, I have to believe that you did not mean to wrong me, and as a result, I want to create a platform for dialogue and exchange, because perhaps in this moment I can learn from you and vice versa. So yeah, I think there has to be, on the other side of that, this willingness to see the other person's perspective. But I that's all a part of having a brain. It's all a part of being an entrepreneur. That you're not going to be everything to everyone. You're not going to get everything right. But your values and what you say as a part of your story and what you claim to be will guide your principle. They will guide you as you navigate this space. And anytime you divert from that, you refer back to your story, because that brings you back to what is core and what is central. But yeah, that's my thought on that.
That's awesome too, because I think it brings us full circle as we get ready to close, that the story can also kind of point to how you can know I'm not like that, right? That's another, kind of, as a company and as a person, for me, it's like what you're saying. If you know me, or let's go ask some people that do know me, you would know that it's not even possible for me to make you feel the way you're claiming I'm making you feel, because that can never be my intention, given my values, given my character, given my past history. What you're claiming to be possible as my motive, my intention, my ability to come at you that way is not even congruent with who I am. And as a brand story, it can be the same way. Like, this brand did this today. they hurt these people. Well, look at our initiatives, look at our foundations, look at our marketing, look at our story, and everything that's congruent with, like you said, inclusion, helping people, where we come from, how I used to live, right? Somebody who's living the way that you used to live,
Right.
or has the same issue that you used to have, may not even have read your story yet to know that you actually have more in common than apart. They're just looking for a way to be in outrage culture, victim culture, because it's easier to create buzz with a negative than it is for a positive, right? There's more on the news, more, crime, weather, protect yourself from this, or did you know this might be affecting your kids? It's more like fear baiting than it is, look at all the great stuff that happened. And the same thing with headlines and stories and things that go viral. It's always more pile on your negative 2 cents, like it's even your business, on this thing so you have something to do, rather than celebrate people, tell stories, and bring the positive mentality.
Yeah, and and just to kind of like summarize what you said, especially like that beginning part, when I sometimes, even though the brand story, the original brand story, uh, gives you this idea of the intentions of this person, right? Again, sometimes we inadvertently vary from that story, right? So when we're talking about the brand that I mentioned earlier, where the tagline was "Take risk and tackle life," there was a moment where I felt like one of the ideas that I wanted to put out there was a little controversial, or one of the style gestures, right? I was styling some mannequins and kind of wanted to step outside the box, right? And then I thought, that may not be a good look. Somebody may misinterpret that. They may not understand that. And it was, again, the phrasing "take risk, tackle life" that came to my mind, right? And it was like, no, you said that in a way that you would take risk, right? That the brand itself is about taking those risks. And with risk taking, there are some pitfalls. There are some people that are going to disagree with that. There are some people that are not going to necessarily understand that. But there are some people who are risk takers that will latch on to that, that will see that as a bold move and celebrate that and jump on that particular idea with you, right? And so, again, the things that you say about who you are will always lead you back, right? And so it's the same thing, is that we can veer off from what we originally said, but it is those things that bring us back to. And so, ideally, it's all about, it really is about sticking to the story and letting that story be your guiding principle as it relates to your relationships and your connections with your customers, with your client, but also, just with yourself.
I'm gonna leave it there, because I can't say it better. I can't. That was beautiful. Yeah. Let the people know who are here how they can get in touch with you. I'm sure some people want some help with their brand story. They've enjoyed your perspective and your intelligence. Please, how can they reach out to you?
Sure. So reach out to me in a few different ways, but you can go to my website, www.superlativeconsulting.com. You can email me at anderson@superlativeconsulting.com. Of course, we're on Instagram at Superlative Brand Consulting. This platform is at Music Gatekeeper. It's my personal one, so you can contact me. You can contact Mark.
Definitely.
And Mark can forward
reach out to me.
On to me. And so I'm accessible. And, I do consultations. So if you just have an idea that you want to talk about really quickly, 30 minutes, I don't mind helping you with that. We're all trying to get it together. So.
All right. Say that again.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. And everyone who attended, thank you so much for taking your time being here. This was such great audience participation. I'm really grateful for everyone who's here. Thank you for attending. So blessed to be able to share with everyone here these high value conversations with people I have great relationships with. And I just love talking like this. And, I just had the idea one day. I was like, man, if people could be, an audience to some of the great wisdom that I get to receive from the wonderful people in my life, then, that's something that I wanted to be able to bring into the world. So thank you for being here, and we'll see y'all in the next one.